we consider giving circles to be a powerful force for diversifying and democratizing philanthropy.
What are the secrets that drive the businesses you love or nonprofits you admire? Join us as we uncover the surprising ideas at the intersection of causes and brands. I'm Dave Raley.
And I'm Carly Berna. Each episode, learn from leaders of nonprofits and companies that will give you insights that you can put into action. This is the Purpose and Profit Podcast.
This episode is brought to you by Virtuous, the only responsive CRM that provides fundraising, marketing, and volunteer tools you need to create personal connections with your donors and grow giving. Learn more at virtuous.org. Hello, everybody. Today, we're thrilled to have Emily Rasmussen with us. Emily is the founder and CEO of Grapevine, the only platform dedicated to giving circles and the collaborative giving movement. With nearly 15 years of experience in nonprofit leadership and impact financing, Emily has an incredible background, from launching innovative initiatives at NYU and at Lincoln Center to developing microfinance programs in India. She's also a former professional ballet dancer and an MBA graduate from Harvard Business School. Emily, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Emily, you may not know this because we've only recently met, but I am located in the Pacific Northwest, and my wife was a lifelong ballet dancer. Did not make it to the Pacific Northwest Ballet, but how was that? How was that experience?
Oh, it was amazing. And I did not know that. That's very exciting. Thank you for sharing. I feel like all of us in the ballet community are a kindred spirit. And so it's always fun to meet others. And being in the ballet world is, it's a beautiful art form. It's an extremely challenging art form. Oh. And so it really builds your resilience and your dedication. It's a pretty incredible thing to be a part of. And my time in Seattle in particular was really special because it was the first city I moved to away from home. And I got to perform there and train there, first company that I really got to work with. So a wonderful time. Cut a bit short. I had an injury and ended up having to recover from that, and ultimately decided around that time that I'd always known at some point I was going to go to college and pursue other things. And it just felt like with all of that it was the right time to make a change. But it was a really wonderful experience.
Talk about building resilience for sure. I would love to hear your, essay at some point or speech on lessons I learned from dancing professionally. All my experiences, either through my wife or just watching movies. So such a craft, but like you said, you can, it's really demanding for sure.
Absolutely. Those things where people give you tips on how to think about hiring and how to hire for different, experiences that are outside the workforce. I tend to always, whenever I see someone as a dancer, I'm like, I want to talk to that person because they're the kind of person that will, work until the job is done and just be very committed. Happy to talk about that more at some point. Maybe there will be a future blog post. We'll see.
Well, let's fast forward a bit. So Grapevine, I mentioned that you're the CEO of Grapevine. Tell us a little bit about how you got even into that space and what does Grapevine do?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So actually going back to the ballet experience, when I had that injury, it was right around the same time that 9/11 happened. And I think that for me was a real moment to think about what did I want to do in the world and what was I passionate about. And for me, that it made me realize that I really wanted to be involved in the world and social impact in a way that felt like it was addressing some of these larger issues. And to me, I came back to this idea of economic development and access. And ultimately, that led me to pursue a degree at Occidental College, focused on diplomacy and world affairs and economic development. And so that set me on a path to where I was able to intern at the United Nations for a semester and learned a lot about microfinance, and ultimately went to India to do some research on the model there, and then moved back after school to work to help build microfinance programs there. And I ended up continuing to do that work with an agency that was building microfinance programs globally. And so that was really my initial foray into this kind of community-based financing work, where I really saw the power of getting dollars into the hands of people in their communities and, seeing what they would do with it, where they would invest it to have the most impact. And just around that time when I was doing that work, it was the early days of crowdfunding. So I was seeing Kickstarter launching and Kiva was taking off, and I didn't have a technology background, but I just saw the power of that, and the idea of it was so incredible to me, this tool that could help unlock funding from communities around the world for communities around the world, like the ones I was working in. And so that's where the initial spark happened, I would say. And ultimately, it led me to pursue an MBA and think about, what is this space? I want to learn more about this space of crowdfunding, and I want to better understand how I can fit in it. I didn't see a particular job or a company or anything that I wanted to go work at necessarily. So I really wanted to learn more about it and think about, what might I add to this? What might I create? And out of that came this idea for a collaborative giving experience, something that would be more purposeful for donors and more continuous and ongoing and impactful ultimately for communities. So that's kind of the full story. And as I was experimenting with concepts around that, I definitely did some experimentation while I was in business school, and launched a crowdfunding platform, and kind of was consulted for Kickstarter. So got to explore there, but then spent some time in the nonprofit sector afterward before I decided to venture out and begin experimenting with what ultimately became Grapevine. And so that's the long story.
That's great. When Dave introduced you, he said Grapevine was the only platform dedicated to giving circles. And I've been in the nonprofit space for over 10 years, and I had never heard of a giving circle before this. So before we start diving into more about this, can you just walk through what a giving circle is for those listening like me who didn't know what it was?
Absolutely. And Carly, I will also admit that when we got started, I had never heard of a giving circle either. So I was really coming at this more from how do we create a more meaningful, purposeful crowdfunding type model. And as we started experimenting, a few giving circles discovered us and reached out. And that's where we realized, oh my God, this is amazing. There's this whole grassroots movement of people doing this kind of collaborative giving that we've never even heard of, but are doing exactly what we had imagined trying to enable through technology. So a giving circle, for you and for everyone else who hasn't heard of one, it's really a very simple concept. It's about a group of people that come together to pool their resources and collaborate to make a bigger difference. And most often with a giving circle model, you're pooling your donations and then collaborating to decide where to make a larger collective gift to an organization. Now, there are many different types of giving circles. Most giving circles are donating to nonprofit organizations, but some are donating to 501c4s or are giving to individuals to do projects. So there is a variety of ways in which the money can be directed in terms of where it's going for impact. And then there are also a variety of ways in which people go through this process of identifying where they're going to give to, and even in thinking about how they're structuring their group. There are some groups where they're pooling money every quarter and they're giving to a different nonprofit every quarter. Some are pooling money every month and supporting a different nonprofit or project, like I mentioned. So there really are a lot of different ways in which people are kind of adopting this model and adapting it to fit their goals, both in terms of their impact goals and also in terms of their community. How much money does it make sense to ask community members to give? Some giving circles will have people give $10 a month. Some are giving $10,000 per member per year. So it's a flexible model in that way that really can flex to fit a variety of communities and impact goals.
When you talk about the idea of giving circles. Okay, so that's one term. The other term that we've used here is this idea of crowd granting.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think a lot of people are familiar with the idea of crowdfunding. You know, a lot of charities that Carly and I have worked with have,
Mm-hmm.
said, hey, create a page on our website and ask your friends to give money so I can run the marathon, right? So I think a lot of people think of crowdfunding. So how is crowd granting different? And then why is that a more powerful approach to philanthropy?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm a big fan of crowdfunding as well, a very powerful model. But where I came at this from initially was that idea that crowdfunding was compelling, but also felt pretty transactional to me. And that's when I was, in business school, exploring different models and thinking about this space. And so for me, I was interested in creating something that felt more community-based, more connected, more purposeful, and recurring. And
Mm-hmm.
so ultimately, we initially envisioned Grapevine as the first crowd granting platform, distinct from crowdfunding in four key ways. So the first being community. So these are the four C's of crowd granting, just to boil it
Okay.
down. The first is community. So it really is about connecting and being in community with the other members of the group, but also often the organizations that you're supporting, right? So if you think about a crowdfunding campaign, you might be pitching into a campaign for an organization that someone else has selected and now they're raising money for it. But you're adding your donation into the pool. You're not necessarily
Mm-hmm.
connecting with all the other people who are adding their donation into the pool in any meaningful way, right? Let alone connecting with the organization. So the first C is community. The second one is collective resources. So yes, you're pooling your money just like you are with crowdfunding, but you're also often pooling your knowledge, your networks, your experience, because the third C is collaboration. And that's where you get to help decide where this money goes, right? Again, you're not just pitching into the campaign for the nonprofit that Carly cares about. You are saying, hey, Carly, let's come together and collaborate to identify nonprofits and decide together where we can have the most impact with our pooled funds. And then the fourth C is continuation. Most giving circles are operating on a recurring model where they are giving out grants every quarter, a couple times a year, once a year, whatever the case may be. The cadence varies, but most of them are continual in that way as opposed to a one-time campaign.
Emily, this is so helpful. Even just as I kind of reflect on that difference, it's completely different, right? I mean, with crowd granting, just this idea of community, one, that's beautiful. And I'm going to ask you a question in a minute about, what are some examples? But just the fact that these are communities or circles, so to speak, of people that are coming together, the fact that they are pooling their collective resources totally makes sense. But then there's this agency that they have, that they're actually helping to decide where the funds are going. I think that's a distinct difference from crowdfunding, where often it's like, no, I'm running the marathon for clean water. And so if you give, by definition, you're going to give to clean water, which is just a different approach. And then this idea of it being recurring. That's something that Carly and I are deeply passionate about. That's something that I focus on. Actually just had a book release on sustainable giving and what recurring giving looks like. And so to know that these groups are doing this in this pooled giving circle sort of way is so cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the nice thing with this model too is a lot of us want to give. We want to make an impact, right? We all start New Year's off with our New Year's resolutions, and often that's a part of it, right? But we don't always succeed at all the things that we set out to do. It's hard to actually make the time and to remember and all of those things. And with giving, it's similar. It's hard to always find the organizations and make the time. And I think one of the nice things with this particular model is that it really does build a little bit of that social proof into it in terms of being able to work together to find organizations and make an impact. But also there's an element of social accountability, I would say. Not social. I like social accountability more than social pressure, because it's not so much social pressure where I think like crowdfunding kind of can feed on that a bit more. But this is more like you're opting into it, but now you have a community, an accountability community to help you fulfill that. And we talk to Giving Circle members who who talk about how powerful it is to be a part of a group where they're able to lean in and do more and help find nonprofits and all of that when they have time. But then when they don't have time, they know that others are doing that, and they know that their money is still going to be directed to great organizations in their community. So this helps them continue to make an impact in the ways that they'd like, even when they have a harder time dedicating, the extra hours to it.
No, I love that. I love the literal social network, the original old school kind, where you're connecting with other people around a shared passion. So let's drill down into a very specific example. I'd love to kind of illustrate this for folks. So one of the most popular Giving Circles models that you mentioned on your platform is the quote 100 who care model. Mm-hmm. So tell us what the 100 who care model is and why it's so effective.
Yeah, the 100 Who Care community, and there's a 100 Who Care Alliance. It's a whole network of giving circles built in this frame. And they're just an incredible network, an incredible community. And it was started years ago by a woman who had this idea of bringing other women together to pool money and give to a nonprofit. And out of that, they continued to do that work there. And that inspired other people who heard about it to start a similar model in their community. And so now they have this massive network. But really the core of the model, I think what's so powerful about it is its simplicity. And it makes it very accessible to people. And so the idea is that you get 100 people together, everyone pitches in $100, and now we have a $10,000 check to give away. And typically we're going to do that in 1 hour. So the group will come together in an hour-long event, and often members nominate nonprofits. And so then 3 nonprofits are presented to the community, and then there's a vote. Whichever organization gets the most votes gets that $10,000, and then they do it all again 3 months later. So this is a quarterly giving circle model. And in this model, essentially, each member is donating the cost of 1 lunch a month, right? $100 a quarter, $33 or so a month. But collectively, they're moving $40,000 per year to 4 different nonprofits. So the scale of it is really compelling, and the accessibility of it, I think, has really helped it to be one of the fastest growing and most popular models out there.
Well, and I love how it brings together people who have a common trait. It may be just simply, like I said, women in business, or it could be people in a specific city or region. In fact, before we came across you and the work that you're doing to support this Giving Circles, a friend of mine had posted about, he lives in Pittsburgh, and he posted about being a part of the 100 Men Who Care, in Pittsburgh. And I was like, what does that even mean? It's like, oh, super cool, like social kind of opportunity to support a cause. They vote, they have that shared accountability commitment, that they've made. Mm-hmm. I by the way, I looked at it recently. It's now the 100 plus Men Who Care, because it's like, it turns out there's probably more than 100 people who'd like to join this community. But that is such a cool example of, again, bringing together a community for this kind of shared impact.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I love the point you touched upon there, the social element, because I think people really appreciate getting to connect with others who also care about giving back to their community in Pittsburgh, right? Or who also care about giving back to support early childhood education. Or, we see these groups set up around different locations or cause areas, or even community types, 100 realtors who care. That's also a model. Yeah. So it's powerful, that opportunity to connect with and deepen your engagement with others that you want to do that with, and to do that through the meaningful experience of making a difference together. So we have some really wonderful stories that have been shared with us from our community around people meeting their best friend and meeting their future partner, and all of these things through their experience through these groups.
I love that. We've talked a lot about nonprofit examples here, which, can easily come to mind when we're thinking about causes and people who care and all of that. But I want to touch on a for-profit example, which is also happens to be my favorite company for socks, which is Bombas. So if you're not familiar with them, they sell socks, so they also give socks away. They also have great socks and really great customer service, just from my own experience. But can you talk a little bit about the campaign that you did with them and Giving Circles and kind of how that came to life?
Happy to. Yes, I'm also a big Bombas fan. So we were thrilled when this opportunity came up. Bombas is a company that is also very mission driven. So for every pair of socks you buy, they donate a pair of socks to an organization that is addressing homelessness. So typically, a shelter. It is the most often requested item by shelters. And they've actually designed socks specifically for this purpose. It turns out all the Bombas fun colors and different types of socks and stuff, those don't all work really well when you're a person experiencing homelessness. And so they've actually gone to that work, to that effort to develop something specific for that community. And so the way that the conversation evolved here was that they have this cause they care about deeply. We at Grapevine are hosting a community of 85,000 Giving Circle members, 1,100 Giving Circles across the country. And so Bombas said, well, what if we ran a campaign where we could raise more awareness about this issue in a moment in time in Q1 of last year, where this population is particularly vulnerable. During Q1, it's especially cold. It's a very difficult time for anyone experiencing homelessness. And so we raise awareness about the issue. And then if any of the Giving Circles decide to support a nonprofit organization in their community that is addressing homelessness, we will match that with an in-kind match of donated socks. So they donated 10,000 pairs of socks, and we were able to do a great campaign, raise awareness about this issue. We did an event around it as well and talked more about it with some other thought leaders in the space. And then we saw our Giving Circles really respond and identify organizations that were addressing this. And ultimately, we were able to unlock all of those matches. And hopefully we can do more of that in the future with Bombas and others. But that's just one exciting example of how companies are also getting involved in this space.
Innovation is the lifeblood of any growing organization, and that's exactly what Imago Consulting does. Imago helps nonprofits and businesses grow through innovation. They publish a weekly trends report called the Wave Report. Learn more and subscribe at imago.consulting/wave report. That's imago.consulting/wave report. I love that example because I think sometimes in the marketplace, companies are trying to kind of like force themselves into like cause-driven marketing to like get their customers to feel like, oh, hey, we donate to a nonprofit, so, you should come to us. But this is like so intertwined with Bombas's mission and connection with Giving Circles. Like, I just think it's such a great opportunity to show that alignment so that it feels like so authentic and real and transparent, which I feel like as consumers, even us right here on this podcast, can probably see through a lot of that. But when it's aligned, then that's how, you can unlock all the matches because it feels so authentic.
Absolutely. And I think it's amazing when that works. I think not every company has a product, and a process or a service that always can work with. And so just want to call out too that if you can do something like that, that's amazing. Or if you're an airline and you can donate flights to help move people, or your Airbnb and you can help get people housed when their fire just took their home in Southern California. I mean, these are amazing examples of that corporate social impact. Beyond that, money also really helps. And I think like we've seen a similar model like this, for example, with the founder of Best Buy, who is matching donations made by Giving Circles aligned with the 3 cause areas that he's particularly focused on in communities across the country. And so he realized that, hey, I want to support all these communities that have supported Best Buys across the country. They've been pivotal to our success, but I don't have a big enough programmatic staff to have program officers in every single one of these towns. But what I can do is I can partner with Giving Circles, and he has now matched more than 200 Giving Circles and their gifts by letting them identify the organizations and partnering. And essentially, he's doubled his money to these causes by getting a community match from the Giving Circles, while those Giving Circles have gotten a match from him. So, there are some really great ways to find those win-wins. Whether you have an amazing product where that can be facilitated through the product itself or otherwise.
No, so cool. Well, and the fact that these brands are helping to essentially catalyze generosity. They're not just giving from their, CSR budget or from there, but they're actually encouraging other people to be more generous. I think that's a really beautiful thing. In fact, thinking about the sort of benefits to brands, I'm curious, Emily, not to put you on the spot, but are there specific kind like demographics right now that you're seeing in terms of the kinds of people that end up being involved in giving circles? I mean, from what we've talked about, it sounds like might be more business oriented people or people of wealth or whatever, but just any light you can shed on kind of what the demographics look like these days.
Absolutely. I'm happy to. I really appreciate that question because actually giving circles were started by women. And even now we see about 80% of membership in giving circles are women. And so I think that's a powerful thing to note because, women the traditional philanthropic industry wasn't necessarily built for women. And there are actually some really interesting ways in which women and men give differently, according to the research. We do tend to see that women like to give to a broader range of causes, a broader number of organizations than men do on average, right? But there's some really interesting research around that and how they also like to collaborate more with others in their giving. And so it's not really surprising when you look at those things that women were kind of feeling like there wasn't a giving model out there for them. They weren't going to go and just get a philanthropic advisor to help them give away their money. They wanted to do this in community and be more collaborative. And so I think just, what we see in the movement is that it was started by women and it still now is predominantly driven by women. But as it's continued to grow, we've also seen that it has been adopted by a broader range of people. And we consider giving circles to be a powerful force for diversifying and democratizing philanthropy for that reason. And so amidst some of these other troubling trends, right, where the percentage of households that give has been in decline, what we do see with giving circles is that they tend to engage everyday people. So not just the high net worth or ultra high net worth. In fact, this is a movement of everyday people giving $100 at a time, $500, $1,000 at a time. It's almost in reverse where it started that way. And now we're seeing more of the high net worth people adopting it in some of their work, right? But it's really come from the grassroots everyday donors. And similarly, there's some great research that came out last year that shows that there's a broader and broader diversity of racial and ethnic backgrounds in the movement, a broader diversity of ages. We're seeing a lot of next gens in this movement as well. And so I think what's exciting to us is it started as more of a we're building it ourselves because there isn't a model out there that supports how we want to give. But as it continues to grow, it really is striking a chord with a broad range of people and increasingly organizations. I know we talked a bit about companies and how they're amplifying the impact of giving circles through matching campaigns. But in fact, we're also working with companies that are starting giving circles with their employees. And looking at this as a great model to increase engagement between employees and also connection to the social impact mission of the corporate foundation. And so that's a really exciting way that particular company corporate sector is adopting this and helping to encourage more generosity, but also kind of trust their employees more to help them give away some of their foundation dollars by identifying nonprofits and helping to direct funds. And also nonprofits even looking at this and saying, hey, we want to start a recurring donor program. Why don't we create one in the framework of a giving circle where it's more about community and creating a way for people to connect with each other and giving them even some agency to help decide where some of these funds go within our organization. So, anyway, I went on a little bit of a tangent there, but lots of ways we're seeing it expand.
Well, and you and I need to talk, right? Because I specialize in understanding how recurring giving works and how that's been evolving, especially with the subscription economy. But there's just so much that's happening in our space today, and I do believe that's a core part of responding to what we're seeing in the generosity crisis. For our listeners, if you're listening to this and similar to Carly and I, you may not have been aware of this, or you may have been vaguely aware of this. I mean, just even Emily, I was spending some time on the Grapevine website. I mean, 44 million donations, $1 million through donations, almost 85,000 total members. So this is not this is not the beginning of a wave. It's more probably the middle of the wave, and I'm excited. In fact, Emily, when you think about the future, and we'll wrap up in a minute. We always like to do, by the way, a lightning round of questions. Well, we'll get to that. But so I want to just leave our listeners with this. What do you think the future holds for giving circles, for this field of crowd granting? Where do you see it going?
Oh, I mean, I'm very optimistic. I think in our space broadly, we talk about the need for more engagement, the need for more collaboration. And I see that conversation happening within corporate foundations and at nonprofits talking about their donors. I see that this is a really, really great model for all of those things. Everyone is looking to the future and thinking it's going to be more collaborative and it's going to be more about engagement and connection. And that's exactly what this is. This whole model was built around that. It puts that at the center. And so I'm very optimistic about where this is going. I think all the things we just talked about, as far as nonprofits adopting this, companies adopting this, we're in the early stages of that. So I know we might not be at the earliest stage of the wave. I think we maybe have, it's gone from being that grassroots movement now to really hitting a more center stage, but we're at the early stages of these other adoption waves, right? And so I think what we're going to see is a real explosion of this as some of these larger players now and more well-known players start to adopt it. And I think it's going to become much more mainstream. We're going to move from that early adopter phase to that kind of mainstream adoption phase, I think, with these bigger players moving into the space. So I'm very optimistic about the expansion of it across the country, but also globally through all of those ways.
Yeah, by the way, and I'm a big fan of waves too, for our listeners know that. That's the exciting part to me, is once the momentum starts to build and getting, I mean, if you've been surfing, that's when you should be getting on the wave, not before the momentum builds, right? And so it just sounds like a very exciting time, and super glad that we've had you on the show.
Thank you. Likewise. Thank you so much for the invitation.
This conversation has been really interesting to me because I feel like as a fundraiser in the space, we're always talking about like what's next for fundraising. And we're talking usually more about technology, like what's going to be the new AI thing that we better like figure out how to use. And we're not really usually talking about like different giving strategies. So I love this because it's not like what's the new AI thing. It actually relies more on like collaboration and community, which I feel like post-COVID, all of us are like looking back for that kind of environment. So it's just really interesting to me as I think about all the times I've thought about the future of fundraising for something to kind of like crash in and be like, hey, this is a different model of fundraising, but it is still innovative, even if it doesn't involve like, some futuristic concept.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's interesting is all of those other forms of tech and innovation can feed into this, right? But you're actually going back to the basics and rethinking, how are you thinking about fundraising? Should it just be about using AI to better target a donor and then go after them individually? Or maybe you still should use AI, but is that whole process, should rethink that whole process, because maybe actually you're not the best one to target them initially. Maybe them joining a community where they can build trust and connection with other donors, other supporters of yours is the best first step. And then out of that evolves the process of developing that into a major gift donor, right? So yeah, it's just turning it on its, I don't know if it's turning it on its head, but it's just rethinking the whole process a little bit more. And I do think there's a role for technology throughout that. And I think, we very much fit in that bucket, right? Being the first one to bring it online, we're trying to make this possible at scale and make it accessible. So anyway, those two things, it's exciting to me because I also feel like there's so much more for us to do with some of those tools to make this even easier and more accessible as we continue to grow and build out the platform too.
Yeah, that's awesome. And thanks for sharing all about giving circles with us today. Like Dave mentioned, we always end the podcast with a lightning round. So we didn't prep you with these questions, but they should just be fun questions. So there's like 6 of them, I think. So I'll just kind of read them off to you and you can respond with kind of the quickest thing that comes to your mind. So let's start with, if you could instantly become an expert in any skill, what would it be?
Oh, gosh. In any skill, fundraising. I feel like that can power so many things. Always could get better at fundraising.
Yeah, that's great. Actually, that works both for-profit, nonprofit, lots of ways to fundraise.
All around.
Okay. Second, what's your guilty pleasure TV show or movie?
Oh, goodness. Gosh, we just came through the holidays and I watched so many terrible Hallmark holiday movies. I feel like that's the top of my guilty pleasure recently.
Same with my mom, but I feel like now I'm at the point where I'm like, I can't even watch another Hallmark movie. Like I can't watch anything so predictable.
No, not until next year. Same time, same place. You'll be there.
Yeah. Okay. If you could donate $1 million to any cause, what would it be?
Oh, gosh. I mean, I have to say that giving circles and the work that we're doing, because I do believe in it and deeply, not only for the power of the engagement of donors and all of that, but also one thing we didn't touch upon is what we see with this model, because it's engaging such a diversity of people, is that it's also getting money typically to smaller, more local grassroots organizations that tend to be underfunded. So when you think about moving money through this model, it's not just the process and the value to the donors and all of that, and the engagement and the learning, but it's also that actually I believe strongly that where the money goes is really powerful when you look at it from an impact perspective. So,
yeah, that's awesome. What's the most random thing on your bucket list?
Oh, random. I don't know if it's random, but Antarctica. I mean, I really want to go to Antarctica. I don't know if that's random. I want to go see the penguins, but I also feel bad about going because, you're not supposed to go. So it might always be on my bucket list.
That is pretty random. I just watched like a short little documentary on YouTube about the coldest place on Earth. And I was like, I have no desire to go there.
No. Yeah.
I feel like we might have answered this question in the intro, but maybe you have a different answer. What's a surprising fact about you that most people wouldn't guess? Which I was going to say like ballerina, because I wouldn't have guessed that. But
yeah, I mean, that's a good one. That's normally my card. Oh, the other one that I will sometimes share as a kind of fun fact is that I was homeschooled in a log cabin that my family built growing up. So kind of had a bit of an off the grid upbringing.
Oh, nice. All right. And last lightning round question. If you could switch lives with anyone for a day, who would it be?
Oh, for a day. I feel like it's got to be someone who's just like owning a stage or like whether it's a speech or a performance and just like the energy of that. I mean, I'm a performer at heart from being a ballet dancer before, but there's something amazing when you get that opportunity to exchange energy with an audience in that way. And if it's only a single day, like that kind of exciting experience would be great. So I don't know. I'll have to think about that one, but that's kind of what comes to mind.
That's great. Well, Emily, again, thank you, one, for just investing your life into helping to further generosity. And for Grapevine, by the way, as a brand person, also just love the vibe of the idea of a grapevine, right? So very fitting. And excited to just see over the coming years how Giving Circles, how crowd granting continues to grow and help to be a part of shaping generosity. It's been great to have you on the show.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the invitation. Really enjoyed the conversation, and I look forward to continuing the conversation offline.
Absolutely. And for our listeners, I hope you've learned something today. If you want to learn more, we're going to put some links in the show notes. You can head over to the Grapevine website at grapevine.org. And until next time. We're grateful for our partners this season, including Virtuous, a software company committed to helping nonprofits grow generosity, Faith Search Partners, an executive search firm specifically for faith-based organizations, and Imago Consulting, an advisory firm that helps nonprofits and businesses grow through innovation. For more episodes, find us wherever you get your podcasts and be sure to subscribe so that you're always up to date. Would you do us a favor? It would be great if you would rate the show and leave us a review. Your feedback is so valuable to us. Follow the show on LinkedIn, or you can reach us at our website at purposeandprofitpodcast.com. On the site, you can also sign up for our email newsletter to get updates whenever we launch a new episode. Thanks for listening.